I'm Eric Nee, the editor-in-chief of Stanford Social Innovation Review, which is based in the United States at Stanford University. Stanford Social Innovation Review is a media organization that brings together leaders of social innovation from around the world to share new ideas, research, and approaches to improving society. The articles are written by and for leaders of social change in all parts of society: business, government, nonprofits, civil society, social enterprises, and academia. We believe that improving society requires the work of all of these people and organizations. We also believe that social innovation is a global phenomenon, and we are honored to partner with Hanyang University and Stanford Social Innovation Review Korea as one of the hosts of today's convening. You previously heard from my partner, Michael Voss, the publisher of SSIR. Like Michael, I'm happy to be with you today, even if virtually. I wish we were all together in person as we were last fall in Seoul. At last year's meeting, one of the topics that was discussed was collective impact. This year, we are diving into that subject in greater depth. I've been asked to help kick off today's convening by giving you some background on collective impact, how it has evolved over the years, and what relevance it has today and in the future. The reason I've been asked to do that is because Stanford Social Innovation Review published the first article on collective impact almost 10 years ago to the day, in November of 2010. And I was the person who worked with the authors, Mark Kramer and John Kania, as the editor of the article. That article, called Collective Impact, is by far our most popular and influential article of all time. Close to 1 million people have read or downloaded the article since it was first published. It's also been translated into a number of different languages and referenced in hundreds of other articles, both popular and academic. And most important, the collective impact approach has been used by thousands of organizations around the world to help create positive social change. The article was an immediate hit from the time we published it. In fact, just 3 months after the article appeared in Stanford Social Innovation Review, in February of 2011, John Kania, myself, and about 30 other people were in Washington, D.C. at the White House for a day-long meeting with the White House Council for Community Solutions to talk about how collective impact could be an important tool for tackling community problems. Needless to say, that was during the Obama administration, not the Trump administration. So why was collective impact relevant then, and why does it remain so relevant today? Let me start by highlighting 3 trends that I have seen over the last 15 years since I became the editor of Stanford Social Innovation Review, which I think begin to answer that question. First, there's been a growing recognition that no single organization, no matter how large it is, how efficient it operates, how amazing its programs are, can solve a significant problem by itself. It simply isn't possible. It's not even possible in business, where even the largest and most powerful companies like Apple or Samsung rely on a large ecosystem of other businesses and industries to operate. The iPhone, for example, is an amazing tool, but it wouldn't be possible for it to exist if there weren't a cellular infrastructure around the world. And that was created and built with very little input from Apple. It took companies like Qualcomm to invent CDMA and companies like Ericsson to build the network switches. And the iPhone would simply be a fancy camera that fits in your pocket if it weren't for all of the companies that build apps like Google, Uber, TikTok, and Spotify. Well, the same is true in the social sector. You cannot tackle a problem like poverty or climate change or inadequate elder care without the support of an ecosystem of other organizations. And that is what collective impact provides, a mechanism to build and operate that ecosystem. A second and related reason why collective impact has taken off is that there's been a growing recognition that big social problems cannot be solved by a single sector. Even a group of organizations from one sector working collectively typically cannot solve a big problem. Nonprofit organizations and philanthropists cannot do it themselves, nor can a government acting alone typically tackle a big problem, or businesses. It takes the work of organizations from all sectors of society working together in concert to solve problems like climate change, poverty, mental health problems, and drug and alcohol abuse. We've seen this most recently as we all try to tackle COVID. It has taken the collective work of government, business, and civil society to manage the pandemic. The third reason why I think the collective impact has become an important tool in our arsenal for change is that people now understand that the only way to solve significant problems is to grapple with the system that the problem is a part of and figure out a way to change the system itself. You can't solve a problem by focusing only on the symptoms. You have to get to the root of the problem. You can't solve the problem of homelessness by simply putting people into housing. That's an important step, but not sufficient. If you don't deal with the root of the problem, you will just end up with a steady stream of people becoming homeless that you will have to keep finding housing for. To deal with the source of the problem, you have to understand why people become homeless and figure out how to prevent that from happening so that you are no longer just reacting to the symptoms. And that takes looking at and addressing the problem in a systemic way. These are the three important trends that I think have led to collective impact becoming widely adopted around the world. But what exactly is collective impact? Let me begin to answer that question by first posing a different one. What is collective impact good for? What kinds of problems is a collective impact initiative meant to address? Well, at the risk of oversimplifying the world, let's divide problems into two types. One type is what are called adaptive problems. The other are technical problems. Technical problems are the ones where the problem is well understood, the solution is pretty straightforward, and one or a few organizations could implement it. Building a house is one example, or creating a food bank for a community is another. Thousands of food banks have been created around the world. What needs to be done is pretty straightforward. Find a facility to house the food bank. Line up contributions of food from supermarkets, distributors, food processors, and growers. Hire a core staff. Figure out how to reach out to people in need of food, etc. Creating a food bank does not require a collective impact initiative. It can be done by a single organization or possibly two or three. Adaptive problems, on the other hand, are the kind that do require collective impact initiatives. These are the thorny problems, the ones that are difficult to figure out a solution to because there are so many factors at play. Creating an environmentally sustainable town, not just building a single house, is an example of an adaptive problem. Another example is improving the educational outcomes of a particular group of students, say young people living in a low-income neighborhood, or possibly an entire town where the performance of students has not been good. To tackle these problems, you will have to address many different issues. What is the quality of the teachers? How well educated are they? How well paid are they? Are they motivated to teach? What is the culture of the students in the community? Is it cool to be smart or not? What is the home life of the students? Do they have a place to study? Are they well fed? Do they even have a home? Do the parents encourage learning? Is the school well funded? Are the facilities in good shape? Do they have the right equipment? To add to the complexity of this problem, we're not just talking about one grade, but an entire school system from pre-kindergarten through secondary school and on into college. That is what an adaptive problem looks like. And that is the kind of problem that Collective Impact was designed to tackle. So now let's go back to the question I posed earlier. What is collective impact? Well, the simple definition of collective impact is that it is a structured way for multiple organizations to work together to achieve a common goal. Let's break that down. To be more specific, there are 5 conditions that need to be present in the collaboration for it to be considered collective impact. It starts with a common agenda. That means coming together to collectively define the problem and create a shared vision to solve it. But a goal without a way to measure progress is simply a dream. So the second thing that's required is a system of shared measurement. That means that everyone agrees to track progress in the same way so that there can be continuous improvement. The third condition is to have mutually reinforcing activities. This doesn't mean that every organization in the collective initiative does the same thing, but it does mean that the activities should reinforce one another's efforts. To achieve that, the activities need to be agreed on and coordinated so that they all work toward achieving the collective goal. To succeed, collective impact must also have continuous communication among all of the members of the initiative. This transparency helps build relationships and trust among the members and ensures that everyone stays on track. And last, to achieve all of this, there must be a strong backbone to support the collective work. This could be a separate organization, or it could be a strong team comprised of people from member organizations that devote time to supporting the collective impact initiative. These are the 5 conditions of collective impact, and all 5 of them are important. You can't just do a couple and say you're using a collective impact approach. You have to use all 5. That is what distinguishes collective impact from other types of partnerships and collaborations. There are many other types of partnerships and collaborations, and many of them are entirely appropriate to the problem that's being solved. Let me mention 3 that are often confused with collective impact. One type of collaboration are multi-stakeholder initiatives. These are collaborations between organizations from different sectors of society that have a common goal they want to achieve. For example, there might be an initiative between a church, a youth services agency, and a group of schools to raise awareness about the dangers of teenage pregnancy. But what they typically lack is a shared system of metrics to know if they are achieving their goal, a set of mutually reinforcing activities, and a backbone organization to coordinate their work. Another type of collaboration are public-private partnerships. These are partnerships between a government and a private sector organization, which could be a business or a nonprofit, to deliver specific goods or services. For example, a government might contract with a nonprofit organization to have it provide job training for people who lack the skills to get a good job. These efforts are usually narrow in scope, involve a limited number of actors, and don't attempt to tackle the problem at its root. A third type of collaboration that is often confused with collective impact are funder collaboratives. These are groups of philanthropic funders who want to support the same issue and pool their resources to do just that. For example, there might be a group of funders who all believe strongly in conserving tropical forests. And so they pool their money in order to buy a large piece of land in the Amazon. These efforts don't involve organizations from other sectors outside of philanthropy. They don't engage in mutually reinforcing activities beyond writing big checks. And often they don't have a shared system of measurement. There's many other types of partnerships that I could mention, but the point is that in order for an initiative to be considered collective impact, it must have all 5 conditions. Now, the way that these 5 conditions are implemented will, of course, vary from one initiative to another. You may see variations between countries, for example. In one country, the government may traditionally play a stronger role in initiating and leading social programs, and so it might play the role of the backbone organization. And if it did, that backbone organization would have a more formal structure and role than might be the case in other countries. In those other countries, nonprofit organizations may more often play the leading role. And so the backbone organization may be made up of people contributed by several nonprofits and hence have a less formal structure. You'll also see variations depending on how many organizations are a part of the Collective Impact Initiative and how geographically dispersed they are. If there are many organizations spread over a wide area, then there will be a need for a more sophisticated and formal communication system than there would be if there were a smaller number of organizations, all located in one city, who knew each other well, and so on. The point is that there is no one way to implement these 5 conditions. Each collective impact initiative will have to devise these for themselves. Of course, one can and should learn from the efforts of others. And that's why there's an organization called the Collective Impact Forum. It was created in November 2013, 3 years after the article was first published. It was created by FSG, the consulting firm that Mark Kramer and John Kania led, and the Aspen Institute, an organization that brings people together to learn. Today, the Collective Impact Forum has more than 15,000 members. It has a website which has case studies, articles, webinars, and forums where people can share information and ideas. More than 700 members meet yearly to attend workshops and exchange ideas. It is a learning community. The reason I mention this is because collective impact is an evolving field of practice. It is not fixed in stone. The basic structure, the 5 conditions that I mentioned, do remain the same. But within those 5 conditions, there has and continues to be a great deal of evolution. So how has collective impact changed over the last 10 years? One of the biggest adjustments to the collective impact model is in response to critics who said that the approach was too top-down and didn't involve people who were a part of the affected communities in the collective impact process itself. At its worst, one could create a collective impact initiative by simply inviting the leaders of a number of important organizations, along with experts on the subject, to meet and come up with a common agenda, a set of measurement tools, a list of reinforcing activities, a communications plan, and a backbone organization. And then march off and implement the program without once involving the very people in the community who are affected by the problem and the solution. As troubling as that sounds, it actually happened. And most of the time, it failed. For a collective impact initiative to work, it has to involve the community itself. That was just one of the shortcomings of the original model that has been addressed over the last 10 years. So the way that these new insights and learnings have been added to the collective impact model is to create what are called principles. Think of them as similar to the amendments to a constitution. The original Constitution of the United States, for example, remains central, but the amendments have been added over the years to address things that those creating the Constitution didn't know about or believe important. Right now, there are 8 principles that have been added to the collective impact model that help improve upon it. The first is to design and implement the initiative with a priority placed on equity. Too often, programs are designed to simply deliver products or services to people without any consideration of whether they're being treated equitably. In the United States, that often means that white people are treated more equitably than Black people. And in South Korea, that might mean that men are treated more equitably than women. The second principle is to include community members in the collaborative. I've already talked about why that is important. The third is to recruit and co-create with cross-sector partners. It's almost a given today that it is important to bring in people and organizations from different sectors to solve adaptive problems. But that wasn't actually a part of the original 5 conditions, which is why it has been added as a principle. The fourth is to use data to continuously learn, adapt, and improve. 2 of the 5 conditions were to create a common agenda and common measurement tools, but there was nothing in there about using the information that was collected to learn and adapt. As many people have said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. One has to use data to continuously learn, adapt, and improve. The 5th principle is to cultivate leaders with unique system leadership skills. A collective impact initiative requires leaders, of course, but not the typical leader that business schools turn out to run large hierarchical organizations. It requires a system leader who can enlist the support of a variety of different organizations who have no obligation to follow that person. The 6th is to focus on program and system strategies. As I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, to create a solution that actually goes to the root of the problem rather than just the symptoms, it's important to use a system analysis to both understand the problem and devise solutions to it. The 7th is to build a culture that fosters relationships, trust, and respect across participants. The Collective Impact Initiative is not simply a set of processes and programs. To succeed, it requires at its core that all of the participants in the collective have strong personal relationships that are based on mutual trust. The 8th and last principle is to customize for local context. The collective impact model was created by 2 Americans and was based on research and examples that drew mostly from the United States. Since then, the collective impact model has become a global phenomenon. And as that has happened, it has become very apparent that the model needs to be adapted for local conditions and context. So now that we understand what collective impact is and what sort of problems it's good at addressing, I'd like to take a look at how well the collective impact approach has performed during COVID. One way that I like to think about the COVID pandemic is that it is a stress test of societies and organizations. Sort of like when you go to the doctor's office for a checkup and they put your heart under stress to see how your body reacts. Or the stress test that the US government now puts big banks through to see how they would perform under severe financial pressure. Well, COVID has done the same thing for countries, for organizations, and for approaches to solving social problems. And some approaches have performed better than others. How has collective impact performed under COVID? How well have they adapted and changed since the pandemic began? In early July of this year, about 4 to 5 months after the COVID pandemic moved out of China and into the rest of the world, the Collective Impact Forum surveyed its members to learn how pre-existing collective impact initiatives have been affected by COVID. The first thing they discovered is that the vast majority of collective impact initiatives were as active or more active during COVID than before. Nearly half, 44%, said that the collective impact initiative was more active than before COVID. 33% said about the same, and only 24% said it was less active. They also learned that nearly all collective impact initiatives have changed the way that they work or changed the focus of their work since COVID. Only 14% of respondents said that not much has changed. The rest, 86%, said they had changed some or a lot of their focus and strategies since COVID. Here are some of the ways that these initiatives changed. 56% said that the backbone organization has played a role in sharing relevant information and resources with their initiative partners to help them navigate through the COVID crisis. 47% said the backbone organization has played a coordination and facilitation role for partners across the community beyond the group of core collective impact partners that predated COVID. 43% said that the collaborative has elevated the voice of community members to become systems leaders to inform the community response work. 38% said the collaborative has provided data that helps inform the overall community response. 35% said that the backbone and partners have advocated for the reallocation of public or philanthropic resources to more pressing community needs. And 35% said that the collaborative has elevated the importance of anti-racist ideas and policies in the community's overall crisis response. The reason I spent so much time going over these survey results is because they demonstrate clearly that most collective impact initiatives are highly adaptable. Even though a collective impact initiative initially comes together around a particular common agenda, metrics, and set of mutually reinforcing activities, they are not fixated on that approach forever. They are able and willing to change what they do and how they do it as circumstances change. In other words, these collective impact initiatives can have benefits that go beyond the original purpose of the collective. They can take on new programs and operate under new conditions if need be. They can foster a general sense of collaboration within their community. They are not a simple tool like a hammer. Instead, they can be a multi-purpose tool like a Swiss Army knife that enables the organizations that are part of the initiative to work together on a variety of tasks and to extend that collaboration approach to the wider community. And what about different countries? How have they responded to this stress test of COVID? It's been pretty obvious that countries that have a strong culture of collective identity have done much better at managing COVID than those countries whose cultures are based on the importance of individual freedom. Why do I say that? The countries that have the lowest rate of COVID cases per capita are primarily in Asia, such as Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. And the countries that have the highest rates per capita are in Europe and the Americas, such as Belgium, Peru, Brazil, the UK, and the US. In countries where the collective is strong, individuals and organizations are willing to put aside their personal needs for the betterment of their community. In countries where personal freedom is highly valued, individuals and organizations are often not willing to do that. To be fair, there were many centuries where societies that had a strong sense of individual freedom led the world in economic growth and individual standards of living. I'm referring to, of course, England and the United States, which together dominated much of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. But that era may be coming to an end. In the next normal, it may be that the 21st century and beyond will belong to those societies where the collective is more important than the individual. Think China, South Korea, Vietnam, and other countries. Pandemics will not go away. There will be more in the future, and those countries that can manage them well will do much better. Just look at the recent GDP growth rates for China when compared to pretty much every other country in the world. Climate change is another example of that, where it requires the collective work and responsibility of society to solve that problem. And it isn't just a country's ability to respond to pandemics or climate change. It's also a country's ability to educate its citizens, to create an economy with a large middle class, to provide healthcare to everyone, and to create an equitable society for all. These ingredients will become even more important in the future and will separate countries that are moving forward from those that are stagnant or moving backward. Countries like the United States are rapidly devolving into societies that are unevenly divided between a small set of people that have huge amounts of wealth and privilege and a large number of people that are increasingly left out of the wealth that their country creates. These are winner-take-all societies. One of the best ways to see that is to look at the companies that these countries create, such as Apple and Google, where a tremendous amount of wealth has been generated, but the vast majority of it has gone to a small number of people. Which brings us back to collective impact. It is an approach to problem solving that prioritizes the collective over the individual. And because of that, it is perfectly suited to the next normal. Will collective impact continue to change? Of course. And as the model spreads to more countries around the world, in Asia, we are certain to see a change and adapt in ways that we are only beginning to understand. Thank you very much.